What's up, everybody? Matt Kajeski here, back again with the Stokastic Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And today I am joined by Nick Lepre. We are going through the top 36 wide receivers. We're going to pick two players that we love and two players that we're a little less bullish on for this season. We'll do two each and we'll go back to back. Nick, I'm excited for this. I love talking top 36 wide receivers. A lot of really good players here. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, I'm feeling great today. And like you said, there's a lot of great players in the top 36. There's probably 10 other wide receivers after the top 36 that you can talk yourself into being top 32, top even maybe 24 wide receivers. So it is very interesting to talk about wide receivers this year. There seems like a consensus top 12, but after that, things are really wide open.
Yeah, for sure. And just for your reference, ADP might be a little different if you're looking at some of these platforms. We're using Underdog Fantasy. They're the primary sponsor of today's video and the best place to play fantasy in the summer. But we have some players near the end of the 36, might be a little different depending on where you look. But just for your reference, that is what we will be doing. And before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. All right. Well, what do you say we start with the players we like a little bit? We'll go back and forth with them.
All right, let's do that.
All right. So we'll start at the top of drafts and look at some players that we both like. I think one that's really interesting that you have highlighted is Brandin Cooks, and he's been recently shooting up boards. He was around wide receiver 30 to start the process. Now he's climbed to wide receiver 25, ADP of 52.8. I think people are just realizing now this Texans offense wasn't as bad as we thought. Davis Mills came in right away, and he was actually pretty efficient. He had 4 games over 300 yards. And when you look at a rookie signal caller, and even worse, he had like a round 2 rookie signal caller. For any of them to come in and do that is pretty impressive. And then there's really no competition for Brandin Cooks. There wasn't last year, and they didn't add anyone of consequence this year. So he is locked in, I think, to an elite target share in an offense that could be ascending. Talk to me about Brandin Cooks.
Yeah, I also think people, while they might have realized that the Houston Texans are a little bit better than maybe they previously believed, they also might have just not realized how good Brandin Cooks is. I understand that Brandin Cooks isn't the most sexy name out there, but this guy just prints 1,000-yard seasons. And even the sports books earlier on in the offseason were giving him a line of like 950 yards. This guy smashes 950 yards and eats that thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He's amazing. He gets over 1,000 yards basically every single year. He was the wide receiver 20 last year in half PPR and 23 in half PPR points per game. He's getting 8.3 targets per game, 5.6 receptions per game, 64.8 receiving yards per game, and he scores 6 total touchdowns. If the Houston Texans offense gets better, Brandin Cooks is still the clear number 1 wide receiver on the team. So you would think that Brandin Cooks could be scoring more touchdowns in 2022. I am very confident in Brandin Cooks this year, and I'm not actually glad that everyone else started kind of figuring that out, right? Because I like drafting him at a very strong discount, but even at wide receiver 24 is where he's going right now, I'm still very comfortable drafting Brandin Cooks, and I'm excited for what he does this year in Houston.
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of continuity here. Same quarterback. Pep Hamilton's back as the OC. It's conceivable they're a little more pass heavy in year 2, just getting better as a team. He had a near 25% target share in the offense, and he was efficient. There's kind of this narrative that he's an old man on the block now. He's only 28 years old. He came into the NFL when he was a 21-year-old, and he was 17th in yards per route run. That 2.00 yards per route run is that like elite threshold, like absolutely elite. He was at 1.96. Like this guy is damn good even when he's not getting targets. And fortunately, that's not a concern here. I love Brandin Cooks this year. I'm still willing to draft him at wide receiver 25. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to draft him there, and I think he could potentially squeeze his way into the top 12 this year, assuming that maybe the volume increases and that maybe if Davis Mills is really better, the efficiency of Brandin Cooks gets a little bit higher because he did only get 90 receptions on 133 targets, but that could increase this year, again, if Davis Mills plays a little bit better.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, a player I'm bullish on is Mike Evans, and he's another player on the rise, ADP on underdog of 15.7, wide receiver 7 overall. You know, he's right there, wide receiver 7 for me, but I've honestly been having internal debates if I should bump him up to wide receiver 6. And I honestly think he might deserve to be ahead of Davante Adams. He checks every single box. He's been productive every single season of his career, like historic production. He's up there with some receivers like Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss in terms of efficiency and what he's put on the field to start his year. And this year, everything is working in his favor. You have Antonio Brown no longer with the offense. Rob Gronkowski no longer with the offense. We'll see if that stays. And then Chris Godwin coming off an injury, expected to miss at least the first few games of the year. This is going to be a pass-heavy, efficient offense under Brady regardless. Even if you look back through the years at New England with Brady, this team is always running up-tempo, pass-centric offenses, and I don't see that changing in Tampa Bay as long as he's calling the shots. So you might be looking at an absolutely monstrous target share, something we saw with like Devontae Adams in Green Bay last year. And if the efficiency's there, this touchdown scorer and already efficient receiver, Mike Evans, he's probably too low in our rankings. And I might move him up to wide receiver 5 before it's all said and done. What do you think about that?
Yeah, when we were talking about our favorite wide receivers, when we were DMing on Slack trying to figure out who to pick, the first player that came to my mind was also Mike Evans, who you selected. So I love Mike Evans, obviously, this season. The touchdowns are very hard to predict in fantasy football every single year at wide receiver, but there are a couple of guys that are kind of cheat codes. I've probably made this joke a million times, but Julio Jones is probably going to score 3 touchdowns, and Mike Evans is probably going to get 10 plus touchdowns. And that's going to be the case yet again this year. Julio might score 0 because he's probably not even going to find a team. But Mike Evans here probably going to be close to the 14 total touchdowns he scored last season without Chris Godwin potentially for 4, 5, 6 games on the season, without Rob Gronkowski, now with Russell Gage. Mike Evans is clearly in the driver's seat early on in the season, and this is a team that is going to be very pass heavy. I understand they go from Bruce Arians, they won't have him anymore, but that doesn't matter at all. They're still going to throw the ball 50 million times, even if they're beating the ever-living shit out of whatever defense they're playing against. Seems like they just like throwing the ball, and Tom Brady loves kind of just putting on more stats, putting it on the defense. So I think Mike Evans is going to have yet another phenomenal year and would be shocked, honestly, if he finished outside of the top 10. I just think he's a lock to be a top 10 receiver. And I understand why some people might even be so confident to draft him at the end of the first round, early second round as a top 4 or 5-ish wide receiver.
For sure. I mean, even if the offense regresses a little bit, they were first in pass rate. They were third in plays per game. And again, if they regress, I don't think it's going to be far because you look back at the Brady era, he's played with some truly atrocious pass catchers, and they've always run this kind of offense. And he's going to be the engine of the offense, checking plays, calling his own plays. It's not really a worry for me. Love Mike Evans in this situation. Let's go to your wide receiver 2, another player that you think could outperform expectations in the top 36. It is Adam Thielen, and I say in the top 36 because he is in the top 36 on Underdog, wide receiver 32. That may differ depending on where you play, but I personally think these are the sharpest rankings and ADPs across the fantasy industry. ADP of 68.5. Talk to me about Adam Thielen.
Yeah, what's funny about Adam Thielen is in April when we first started doing a lot of these videos, one of my must-draft players was Adam Thielen, whose ADP was pick 102, wide receiver 35. It seems like people have gotten very sharp on Adam Thielen. I've been pounding the table for him for months. I love Adam Thielen. When this guy is healthy, he's a lot like Mike Evans. He is a touchdown monster. He only played in 13 games last year, still scoring 10 touchdowns, tied with the same guy in his team who played all season, Justin Jefferson, who had that fantastic year, also tied with Stephon Diggs on the touchdown total. Adam Thielen is a guy that a couple of years ago we were talking about finishing potentially as a top 12 receiver, and we've seen him do it before. Now, obviously, Justin Jefferson is in front of him. There's no real way that Adam Thielen is going to eclipse past Justin Jefferson as the number 1 alpha guy in terms of targets, all that. But I don't think you necessarily need him to have a shit ton of targets for him to be pretty efficient and score a bunch of fantasy points. So even as his ADP keeps on rising, I'm very confident that Adam Thielen is going to be a top 24 receiver and think there is a shot that he finishes as a top 12 guy if he stays healthy, especially with the amount of touchdowns that he is able to score on a per game basis.
I agree with you. I love Adam Thielen. There's a couple concerns, and I'm going to try to address them. One is age. He's going to be 32 years old. And what I have to say about this is he's a player that doesn't really win through athleticism. He's never been the most athletic prospect, even when he was coming out of school. And you look at the receivers that age a little further in their careers, productive into their 30s. It's the players that win through route running and finesse, which is Adam Thielen's game to a T. And then from there, last year, the offense was very run-centric. This year, you're moving to an entirely new coaching staff. And every single report that comes out of Minnesota suggests that they're going to be up-tempo and more pass-heavy. Last year, they were 18th in pass rate. Even if that regresses positively a little bit above the league average, that's going to benefit Jefferson and Adam Thielen alike, really the entire passing game. So I'm bullish on Adam Thielen as well. I think he should be a top 30 wide receiver. Anything else to add?
Yeah, definitely just don't kind of push him away because he's the number 2 receiver on the offense. And like you said, I probably should have brought up that point of the head coaching change and the offense being a little bit more pass heavy. That will certainly help out Adam Thielen a ton. And I think that Adam Thielen really just has been disrespected probably his whole career. But right now, there's some clear disrespect. I mean, where he's going is just way too low, in my opinion.
I agree with you. All right. My second player that I like in the top 36 wide receivers is Broncos receiver Jerry Jeudy. And this is going to be tough. You basically have to pick between either Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton. And there's a difference right now between them. This wasn't the case early in the offseason, but right now, Cortland Sutton is wide receiver 17, ADP of 36.8. Jerry Jeudy's wide receiver 22, ADP of 47.7. Overall, this is an offense I want to bet on. You have a new coaching staff and you have Russell Wilson coming in, so you're expecting efficiency to rise. To me, these players should be neck and neck, and that's just not the case. Jerry Jeudy being cheaper as a wide receiver, I want to bet on. He's produced early in his career, albeit on small sample sizes. His yards per route run jumped from 1.66 to 1.85 in his second year. That's the ascendance we like to see from our young receivers, and he did it while playing with an ankle sprain. If you remember, he sprained his ankle very early on in the season, came back and still put up productive numbers. Cortland Sutton was very productive early in his career with Denver, but since the ACL tear, he's not a player who's really gotten back to that level yet. Again, that doesn't mean he can't do it, but when he was a rookie, he was at a 2.08 yards per route run, and last year that dropped to 1.43, which is 56th in the NFL. So to me, Jeudy has the efficiency already on his side. And with a new incoming quarterback, even if Sutton outperforms him a little bit, you have this difference in ADP to work with. So I'm very bullish on Jeudy. What do you make of him in this Denver situation?
Yeah, I like both him and Cortland Sutton a ton. Personally, I am more of a Cortland Sutton guy, but again, it's not by this wide margin to where I'm going to just yell at you or something, get into some argument about Jerry Jeudy versus.
Yeah, the difference
Cortland
is
Sutton.
that you get Jerry Jeudy much cheaper, which is why I'm more bullish on him.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the reason why I like Jerry Jeudy so much is because of what he looked like in college and what this offense projects to be, right? Going from Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater and then jumping up and getting Russell Wilson. I understand Russell Wilson didn't look all that great last year, but that could just be because Seattle was just really bad, right? Seattle didn't look very good at all. We didn't see Russell Wilson really use any of his mobility last year, which is kind of a staple in his game. He's not Lamar Jackson, not Kyler Murray by any means, but he is a guy that could get loose out there. So I think we see a lot better version of Russell Wilson this year, and that could heavily and will heavily elevate Jerry Jeudy into potential superstardom this year. I like Jeudy and Cortland Sutton a ton, so there's really no holes I can really poke in them here because of where they are going and how good this offense projects to be. To me, it's kind of just a no-brainer to try to leave the draft with either one of those wide receivers, and Jeudy at the discount certainly gets the nod above Cortland Sutton at this point if the ADP stays the same, unless they move closer again, and then it's kind of just
pick your pick. Yeah. I agree with you, and we always say this. You love ADPs, not players, or you hate ADPs, not players. We are trying to get values in our drafts. There's a lot of players I really like, but they're just going a little too rich for my liking. But before we move on here, I want to talk to you about the title sponsor, Underdog. We've been referencing them all throughout the video. They're the best place to play fantasy football in the summer months, and Best Ball Mania 3 has been ongoing all summer. If you don't know, that is a tournament with a $10 million prize pool. All you have to do is draft your team, and that's it. There's no waivers, trades, in-season management, none of that. Underdog gives you your best score every single week, and then the highest score at the end of the year wins. Last year's Best Ball Mania championship team was drafted in June, so there is no time to wait. And better yet, they're going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you use the promo code AWESEMO. That's good for 4 entries into Best Ball Mania 3. Head to UnderdogFantasy.com, the App Store, or even just click the link in the video description below. Use that promo code AWESEMO. Take advantage of your free $100 right now. All right, we're going to transition a little bit here. We've been talking about wide receivers that we are bullish on in the top 36. Now we're going to go to some players that we're maybe a little apprehensive on. What do you say we start with one of your players, DeVonta Smith?
Yeah, let's do that. So when it comes to DeVonta Smith, the reason why I dislike him isn't necessarily, again, because I think he's a bad player here, but because I believe that the situation here is just not all that. Right now, the ADP I'm seeing is wide receiver 34, pick 69.20. That may be slightly off to what you're looking at on Underdog. This is Underdog's ADP, but I'm using a different website to see
He's at 35 now.
35. Okay, so
Yeah.
very similar range anyways, but DeVonta Smith is a guy that I think is a good player again, but he's on a very run-heavy team who just brought in the clear number one receiver there in A.J. Brown. They traded the draft capital for him. They gave him a boatload of a check. They gave him a shit ton of money. So now my thought process is that DeVonta Smith is going to now be playing second fiddle to a clear number one in an offense where the quarterback likes throwing to the tight end. So now could DeVonta Smith see an even bigger hit to him compared to Dallas Goedert? In my opinion, I believe so. I think that Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, so it really has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts, more to do with the offense. Last year, DeVonta Smith had 103 targets. I think that is bound to go down in 2022. I think he's still a fine player to draft in a best ball league because I think there's going to be games where DeVonta Smith's speed really shows off and he just has this monster game. He breaks free, has these crazy games. But in terms of a redraft league, especially if I haven't already loaded up on wide receivers, if DeVonta Smith's my wide receiver too, I'm just not that excited about that, frankly. So that's kind of why I'm fading him right now. Again, it kind of has to do with the ADP and a lot to do with the offense bringing in A.J. Brown. What do you think about DeVonta Smith?
I'm in full agreement with you. It's just hard to see a ceiling outcome. When you look at the offense overall, last year they were 31st in pass rate and neutral game scripts. Maybe they jumped to 29th tops, but they're going to be a bottom four team in terms of pass rate. This team's actually projected to be pretty good, and they have a good win total. When teams play ahead, they naturally run more, and that's already Philadelphia's preferred game plan. Everything with A.J. Brown makes a lot of sense to me. Ultimately, it's an offense that doesn't vacate any targets at the wide receiver position, but you have an influx of all-pro talent coming in. He's just flat out not going to out-target A.J. Brown. And when we already have concerns with the pass game volume-wise, it's really tough to get behind DeVonta Smith at his current ADP. Even though he's wide receiver 35, that's not a ton to pay. There's receivers behind him that I'd rather take shots on that are just going to see more volume, like Drake London, or maybe a bet on Michael Thomas that he goes back to the previous player he was before injuries. There's players I'd rather take shots on at the upside behind him. So we're in full agreement here. Anything else to add?
Yeah, and again, we kind of have made this very clear. It's not that we hate any of these players. It's all about where they're going in drafts. If DeVonta Smith magically fell 5, 6 picks at the wide receiver position, if he fell a lot deeper, then maybe we are a lot more interested in him. But based on where he's going right now, especially again, you kind of outlined it better than I did. This is just going to be one of the most run-heavy offenses in the NFL. And a lot of times they're not going to be able to support multiple wide receivers, especially with a guy who's going to command as many targets as A.J. Brown.
Agreed. My first player is certainly this idea that we hate ADPs, not players. And I don't even think you agree with me here, but my first player is Diontae Johnson. He's wide receiver 21, ADP of 43.1. First thing I want to say is I don't hate Diontae Johnson. I would just rather have Jerry Jeudy, Allen Robinson, Brandin Cooks, maybe even the likes of like Darnell Mooney behind him. And there's a lot of reasons why. First and foremost, they're changing situations at quarterback. They had an offensive coordinator last year, but Ben Roethlisberger was largely calling plays, and his preferred play was take a 3-step drop, check it down to Diontae Johnson. Now you're moving to some combination of Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. They're going to actually have an OC calling plays here, and you could see that target share drop, which was really driving Diontae Johnson last year. He wasn't efficient. He was getting it done through volume, which is a big concern for me. And ultimately, if you have a Pittsburgh offense that's going to try to be run heavy with Najee Harris, changing quarterbacks, and you have talented receivers behind him, you have George Pickens coming off the board on day 2 to this team, you have Chase Claypool, and you have a day 2 pick in Pat Freiermuth at tight end, there's maybe more competition than this offense initially lets on. So for me at an ADP of 43.1, I would simply rather have Jerry Jeudy, Allen Robinson, and the likes of most of the players I already mentioned. What do you think about Diontae?
Yeah, I kind of understand your argument, and I definitely understand what you're saying about Diontae Johnson and how it has nothing to do with the player and a lot about the situation. The biggest worry for me is what you talked about, is the fact that Big Ben literally couldn't throw the ball to anyone, but magically when he threw the ball to Diontae Johnson, it looked like he was 23 years old, right? It looks like he was the old Big Ben. He knew exactly what he was
I
doing.
don't know about that.
Oh, yeah, maybe not, but you get what I'm saying, right? At least the ball was somewhat near Diontae Johnson. When he dropped back to throw the ball to like Chase Claypool, he threw the ball into another area code. So I hope kind of you understand what I'm saying, but things were a little bit better for Diontae Johnson, right? And this guy just got peppered with targets last year, 169 targets. And that is much of the reason as to why he was so dominant. He did fix the dropping issue, which was a big issue in 2020. If you remember, a lot of people fading Diontae Johnson because he couldn't catch the ball, which was fucking stupid, obviously, after what we saw in 2021. But I understand where you're coming from. I just really do believe, regardless of the quarterback position, that Diontae Johnson is the most talented wide receiver in this offense. I think the offensive line still isn't all that amazing. So I would find it really difficult for Mike Tomlin and this team to fully commit to the run. Like maybe some people are thinking with Najee Harris. So again, I like Diontae Johnson more than you. I don't love him. I have moved him down my rankings. He's no longer top 10, top 12 receiver. I think he does have that upside, but I have to understand that what if Kenny Pickett's really bad? What if Mitch Trubisky's really bad? That could certainly hurt Diontae Johnson a ton.
I think there's one positive argument for him, and that is historically earning targets is a skill. So normally you have a guy that is getting 170 targets, which Diontae Johnson got last year, is at 169. Usually only good players get that. Now, there are some outliers here and there, and I think he could be closer to an outlier than some other players. So ultimately, that is going to be betting against him in a range where there's a lot of players I like. But let's go to your final player, a guy you're not so bullish on, and that is Marquise Brown. He's the former Baltimore Ravens receiver. He transitions over to Arizona via trade. He certainly benefits from DeAndre Hopkins getting suspended, but at some point, DeAndre Hopkins is going to come back to this offense. And when you look at Marquise Brown, you're paying a pretty steep price right now. He's a wide receiver 16 with an ADP of 36 overall. You got to draft him usually inside the top 3 rounds to get him. It's a lot to pay for him. What do you think of Marquise?
Yeah, it's another case of the ADP is just so wrong, in my opinion, on Hollywood Brown. Like you said, DeAndre Hopkins is going to come back. He's suspended for PEDs, but he's going to be perfectly good to go in week number 7, unless they have their bye there. You get what I'm saying? He's going to be back after those 6 games, and he is going to be ready to go, fully healthy. Last year, D-Hop was dealing with a bunch of injuries, and if I'm being honest with you, I think Hollywood Brown's a good receiver, but we saw him struggle a decent amount last year. Maybe the fact that he's talking about, oh, the system wasn't for me in Baltimore. Maybe that's true. Maybe we see Hollywood Brown ascend for the first 6 games of the season, but the second D-Hop's back, D-Hop's the number 1 guy. It's not like Hollywood Brown is this guy that profiles as an alpha wide receiver. The reason why he was the number 1 receiver is because the Baltimore Ravens wide receiver course was pretty bad, right? So Hollywood Brown is able to be that guy. I think he's a good player, but at his ADP on a team that's going to just push him to the side, in my opinion, for DeAndre Hopkins 6 weeks into the season, unless you're going to do one of these things where you draft him, you play him the first 4 weeks, and then someone doesn't realize that DeAndre Hopkins gone, you're playing with a bunch of silly gooses and you trade his ass to one of those guys, right? Then go ahead and do that. But I'm going to be honest with you. I think we're going to see a really strong start and a catastrophic finish for Marquise Brown, which is kind of the typical for the Arizona Cardinals, right? Start off strong, finish terribly.
I mean, he's been good. He hasn't been great. And I think when you're
Yeah.
drafting a guy with a first round pick, you need them to be great. His yards per route run was 1.61 last year. That was 43rd in the NFL. And like him saying the system wasn't great for him, I don't, what does he expect going to Arizona playing behind DeAndre Hopkins for more than half the season? I mean, he was unquestioned the number 1 target there until Mark Andrews ascended towards the end of the year. This guy had 146 targets in Baltimore's offense. Like, I don't know if he gets there in Arizona this year with DeAndre Hopkins, not to mention they have some talented players behind him, like Rondale Moore is a player that's ascending in the offense. And historically, they spread it around. It's not like even when DeAndre Hopkins is on the field, he's commanding this 33% target share. He is the target leader, but I mean, we're not talking Devontae Adams level targets. So even in those first 3 weeks, I don't think Marquise Brown is going to be getting 10 targets a game or anything like that, which maybe he expected, but it's a long shot in my opinion. Anything else to add?
And like you said, they still have Zach Ertz there, who commanded a decent target share, especially in the red zone. Hollywood Brown last year struggled immensely when it came to scoring touchdowns. That one game against Detroit, he probably dropped 12 of them. It was probably like 3, but yeah, he just was not playing all that well in that game, which is really funny because it's just very sad because of how much money I kind of set on fire in DFS that week. But at the end of the day, I really do like Hollywood Brown, the player. Unless his ADP is vastly different in redraft, which I haven't seen. I've done a bunch of redraft mock drafts, and Hollywood Brown is still going in a similar range. So I get why people are stacking him up with Kyler, but because he's going to have those big games in best ball. But in a redraft league, I'm going to be honest, I just don't love it because I really do feel like when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, then Hollywood Brown's in for a rude awakening.
I agree with you. All right. Last player for me, and it pains me to say it. It pains me so much. It's DK Metcalf. And I mean, he's the kind of player that I love. He's 24 years old. He's 6'4", 235. He has elite speed. He makes plays across the field. But I just can't bet on a guy that's going into the season with some combination of Drew Lock and Geno Smith at quarterback. and the offense isn't going to do him any favors. You look at Seattle, even with Russell Wilson last year, they were dead last in play volume, 56 plays per game. And even worse yet, they were dead last by 3 plays. Like, this team was far and away the least efficient team in the NFL in terms of play volume. And they were 20th in pass rate with Russell Wilson. What is that going to look like with Geno Smith and Drew Lock? Drew Lock is a horrific quarterback. There's maybe half the league's backups better than Drew Lock. So to me, it's like, first of all, they're not going to have a lot of plays. So play volume is going to be down to begin with. And then the targets he is receiving, like, what quality targets are we getting here with DK Metcalf? I hate it so much. I want to rank him higher. Right now, he's at wide receiver 24 on underdog, ADP of 51.8. I'd rather have Brandin Cooks. I'd rather take a shot on Rashad Bateman. Man, I might even rather have Juju Smith-Schuster. We've talked about him a lot in previous videos, the concerns, but like, he at least has upside with Patrick Mahomes. What's the upside for DK? Like 800 yards and 4 touchdowns? I mean, it's so tough. What do you think of Metcalf?
Yeah, this is really one that's a tough pill to swallow, right? Because you see this guy shirtless and he looks like a Greek god. You know, he just looks amazing. He's a great player. That chase down against Arizona was amazing. I don't remember if that was last
That
year
was
or the year
so
before.
cool. And it wasn't even a receiving play for him.
Yeah, it was just insane. The guy is, for what he looks like, you should not be allowed to run that fast for what this guy's built like. It's crazy how good he is of a player. There's rumors that they're going to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. If they trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, Metcalf gets a slight boost, but it's not like Garoppolo is all that great, right? Garoppolo's a game manager. I almost would rather have the upside of DK Metcalf with Drew Lock, because at least Drew Lock's kind of one of those guys that's just going to fucking launch the ball, right? Maybe it's not the most accurate thing, but at least I know he's going to try to throw the ball to DK Metcalf deep down the field. It sucks because Metcalf's been a guy that has gotten over 1,000 yards in 2020, not last season. He was really dominant. He had over 1,300 receiving yards. He had 120 plus targets, 83 receptions. He had 10 touchdowns. He scored 12 touchdowns last year. The touchdowns are bound to go down if this offense is just abysmal, like everyone's kind of projecting. And again, it sucks because we have yet another great player whose situation is just terrible. So DK Metcalf, I'm drafting him in best ball, but in redraft, I'm just fading him. There's really no reason for me to draft Metcalf.
Yeah, it's just so tough and so disappointing what this Seattle regime has done to him. Hopefully he can leave after that rookie deal. I don't know, man. It's just you hate to see it. But anything else to add? Otherwise, that'll do it for us.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know which Godfather movie it's from, but where Don Corleone is like, oh, look how they massacred my boy. That's what they did to DK Metcalf. They just fucking massacred him. He was in such a good situation. And now you see this. It's
Can we
very tough.
just have them trade everyone? Like, full rebuild. Like, why does DK Metcalf have to suffer? You already traded Russell Wilson. Just let him go. Let him go to Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean,
third round pick.
remember how
Doesn't matter.
beautiful it would look when Russell Wilson just put the ball right in Lockett's bread basket, like 1,000 yards down the field. He'd catch it. Oh, it looks so beautiful. Now we got Drew Lock doing that. It's going to be sad television every Sunday. You really hate to see it, honestly.
Tyler Lockett's ADP is wide receiver 47.
Yeah, I know. It's so bad.
And dude, I like the receivers going behind him in drafts. I'm like seeing Tyler Lockett versus Sky Moore and Chase Claypool. And I'm like, you know what? I might rather have Chase Claypool, which tells you the status of the Seattle offense right now. But before we get out of here, make sure to let us know who you guys love in the top 36 in the comment section. Also, maybe guys that you don't love as much, and tell us what you think about the players we highlighted today. You can follow Nick on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. It is on the screen in front of you. I am Matt Gajeski on Twitter at Matt_Gajeski. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you again next time.